Can I start? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is a little. Good evening. Can you hear me well? Yeah. It's a little. Not yet. No. Hello. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council program featuring our esteemed guest, Leah Slick-Driscoll. My name is Eunjung Kim. I'm a ICFRC board member and your host for today's program. As a reminder, we plan for this program to go until 7 p.m. Today is our 8th program in our fall 2025 lineup. We are deeply grateful for the long-standing support from our community. Your help has allowed our organization to grow for 42 years, hosting speaker programs with experts, joining us in person and online from across the world. As a small nonprofit, we exist because of the generosity of individuals like you. As we had last month of 2025, opportunities for nonprofit funding beyond individuals are becoming more difficult as charitable organizations like ours face an uncertain future, especially when focused on uplifting research and stories, advocating for marginalized, vulnerable, and international communities. Please consider making a donation. You can do this by cash or check with the QR code on the table in the room or on the screen behind me, or by visiting our website. Help us keep our free educational programs available over the next year. This and attending our programs is a tangible way you can be actionable in and help make a difference amidst these challenging times. ICFRC would like to give a heartfelt thank you to today's sponsor and partner, the Iowa City Public Library, for providing partnership space and today's food. Did you enjoy food? Yeah. Our next program will be Wednesday, 29 October at 6 p.m. right here in the Public Library. This program is titled, What are the Costs of Widespread Economic Inequality? Increasing inequality in income and wealth is driving economic dissatisfaction and contributing to rising social polarization and conflicts in the U.S. and many other countries. How exactly has economic inequality changed over the last 4 years? And why is inequality growing? And how is inequality impacting social cohesion and sustainable economic development? We'll provide some brief answers to these questions in order to set the stage for discussion about economic policy, because the variety of experiences across countries suggest that growing inequality is a political choice. It is not an unavoidable outcome of modern capitalism. The next program is also part of our fall 2025 four-party series, Big Questions Confronting 2025. There are posters on your table and on our website where you can find more information. Please see our website, icfrc.org, for more upcoming programs. Now, with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Leah Slick-Driscoll. She's a member of Meskwaki Nation of Iowa, second Fox tribe of the Mississippi in Iowa, and is also Winnebago from Nebraska, as well as a member of the Wolf Clan. She received her BAs in history and also social studies education from the University of Iowa in 2009. She received her MA in social studies education from the University of Iowa in 2014. Along with a certificate in American Indian Native Studies, she has been honored to teach 9th through 12th grade social studies at the Meskwaki Settlement School since 2009. She has a passion for Native American history and indigenous studies. She loves to research and get involved in issues that affect Native American people today, and to give her students opportunities to research and be a part in solving these issues. Moreover, Slick-Driscoll has worked closely as a guest speaker and contributor to the Social Studies Education Department, Cornell College under Dr. Deborah Michels, and the University of Iowa History Department under Dr. Jackie Rand, and at Iowa State University under Dr. Kay Swalwell. She's a guest speaker and presenter in the area of social studies education and American Indian history and the literature, and has contributed writing pieces to the book Represent, Racism and Resistance in Iowa, concerning the Meskwaki settlement school and Meskwaki sovereignty and land reclamation. In addition, she leads a simulation she created on Native perspectives for history students, social workers, teachers, and those in public health field. The simulation is included in both the University of Iowa's Iowa Native Space website and publication, and in the book Social Studies for a Better World on Anti-Oppressive Approaches for Elementary Educator by Noreen Rodriguez and Kay Swalwell. Slick-Driscoll has 7 children and 3 grandchildren. Oh my gosh, yeah. Please join me in welcoming Leah Slick-Driscoll.
Thank you so much. My daughter and I were just talking earlier this afternoon. Let me see if how do we get on to?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. We were just talking earlier this afternoon, that when you give a talk like this, time is so limited and you really just want to jump right into language and food. But really, when you're talking to large groups of American people who've gone through the American education system, chances are that some people in the room are very well educated on colonization and Native history, and some people may not be. And so in order for me to really talk about my 2 topics that I'm here for today, I really have to just make sure that most people in the room understand what led us to that moment where we have to have a language revitalization program, or we have to very thoughtfully work on food sovereignty. So I also want to acknowledge that the photos of Meskwaki people in my presentation are the amazing work of Meskwaki Media Services. We have an amazing department of people who record all of the events and the amazing things that people in our community are doing, and they publish an award-winning monthly newsletter called the Meskwaki Nation Times. So all of these photos are pretty much from their work on the Meskwaki Nation Times or their work on meskwaki.org, our tribal website. So just to get started, we know that as more and more people began to come to the Americas, particularly the East Coast, and then from the South, the Spanish, the population of colonial settlers rose as Native populations declined through either warfare, enslavement, epidemics, or fighting to keep their homelands. Assimilation efforts in the colonies were set up very early. Praying towns, particularly in Massachusetts, praying towns were towns where, as the Native population had declined to such small numbers and many natives had passed from epidemics and fighting, the colonists would promise natives, if you come live in this town, you have to give up your native clothing, you can't talk your native language anymore, you must learn English. They would cut their hair. They would, basically try to assimilate them into Native people who were now practicing fully British culture. So this was an early precursor for what was to come in the boarding school system. The thought that natives cannot exist with their culture and with their life ways, food ways, living next to Euro-Americans, or Europeans at this time, colonists. So after the Revolution, we know that the British had promised natives in the Proclamation of 1763, because they wanted to trade with natives and gain wealth the same way that the French were, that they would do everything they can to not allow their colonists to cross the Appalachians into native homelands. Well, once the war was lost, the Revolution is the beginning of a 103-year war on every native nation west of the Appalachians. And so we know that, there's a reason that many natives do not celebrate Independence Day or 4th of July. That's the beginning of it, everything for us. And so, little by little, the government's aim is to first secure the land. And at that point, they're not really paying attention to, let's make laws about language and food. They're basically just trying to secure the land and get as much, recruit as many settlers as possible to come occupy formerly native inhabited lands so that they could actually say, we're holding the land. And so we know that the Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830, which caused nearly every tribe in the East to have to move to the West. At that time, Americans thought of everything west of the Mississippi as the great American desert. So they thought, we will never want those lands anyways, so let's just move them to those lands. And so once these natives are in Indian territory and most of the natives from the East have been removed, we know that some had successful strategies to stay in the East, but a very small number. At that point in time, most were forced to move to Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma, which back then was kind of called Indian Territory as one big conglomeration. Once they got onto the reservations, food sources are controlled. Native people are considered violent, aggressive fugitives if they leave the reservation. So they cannot go out and get their traditional sources of food, which would be, animals that they would hunt in their environment. In Oklahoma and in these Great Plains regions, you're talking about natives who are from the fertile soil regions of the United States. They're used to growing their crops and their seeds in a fundamentally different soil that has a lot more water. So a lot of their crops are not very successful in the new area that they're in. So there's a lot of mass starvation. And the food that is supplied is obviously cheap food that can be kept over a period of time. So pickled, canned things, flour. This is when the colonized food, fry bread, is created. Fry bread is it's a preventative for mass starvation. When they drop off lard, flour, baking powder, salt, what are you going to do with that? Like, Native people had no experience with using these materials. They had nothing in their diet that was useless in that way, like to your nutrition. And so it began a devastating change on Native health, going from pristine whole foods, animals that had very little fat content, that were grass-fed, that grew up in their wild environment, and they're eating buffalo, deer, elk, moose, other animals, fish, anything like that. And these are not animals that have a lot of fat. They're not animals that have been eating, foods that are changed. So by 1900, after 103 years of intense warfare, 3 to 4% of the Native population remains, with about 220 Native people left living. And there was a concept at the time that Native people were a dying people and would no longer be alive in a few short years. So then there began this period of romanticism of natives, trying to take their pictures quickly before they disappear. We know that today, and as of 1890, natives have about 4% of their indigenous lands. So there is an interactive map of native land loss, and let's see if I can make it work. So just so that we can kind of see how that happened. I've tried to use this map many times and make it stop at a moment that I wanted it to, and you just can't, so it just keeps going. So, all right. But you can see that in red is what is left today. And of course, the US Census makes a map that's accessible to everybody if you are interested in having a map like this in your classroom or for yourself personally. So, okay. Whoops. Uh-oh, okay. There we go. And then we have the reservation system, which I've already briefly talked about. This is when food begins to change drastically. And we all know, especially with the most recent research, that what we eat determines every single thing about our health. All of the research coming out now shows that our gut health is one of the most important things. When you go from a pristine diet of indigenous foods, and we know that roughly 70% of what the world eats came from the Americas, food that is grown or cultivated by native people from the tip of the Arctic Circle all the way down to the tip of South America. At this point, natives are made wards of the US government, and I explain that to my students. Many of them have read or seen the movie or book, The Series of Unfortunate Events. So I explain to them that natives are given this lower status of not quite being seen as adults and able to make their own decisions. The US government says that they're going to pay them for their land. In our case, it was about 6 to 12 cents an acre, but they put it into an account that's managed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And every time a tribe wants to spend some money on something, maybe they want to buy more medicine or they want to build something, they have to ask the Indian agent or the Bureau of Indian Affairs if they can spend their own money, the way that a child would have to ask their parent. Well, this system was in place for more than 100 years, and a woman named Eloise Cobell in the 1980s discovered that in just a 10-year snapshot of Indian accounts, $200 billion was missing from Indian accounts. She brought a successful lawsuit against the United States, and it was found to be true. And so a small amount of $6 billion was settled onto Native people, collectively, all the Native people of the United States who had money taken from their accounts. And at that point in time, the records were paper form, and the warehouse in the Southwest, where all these paper documents were stored, had a fire about 1 month after the records were demanded by the court, and no backups were made. So the US government could not answer the question, where did the $200 billion go? So today there is, if you're interested in looking at the story, it's called the Cobell case. She did live to see the victory, but she did not live to see the money actually dispersed. So she passed away from cancer just shortly before the money was, dispersed to anybody who had an IIM account or individual Indian monies account. So we know that the agent was responsible for dispersing supplies, and they could use that to punish or reward people who adhered to what they wanted them to do. So, okay, I will just lastly note that Native religion, up until 1970, you could be arrested for practicing your traditional culture and having your ceremonies. You could also be in trouble for speaking your native language. That was outlawed and banned. So there's lots of books. If you're interested in learning more about the reservation period, Dee Brown, of course, wrote his famous book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and it's been since made into an award-winning film of the same title. And then there's also the book that kind of started started the fire of the Native civil rights movement. Custer Died for Your Sins by Vine Deloria Jr. And then the textbook that I use in my classroom for my students, because certainly the American history textbook would not be sufficient for learning a true history. Sorry. It's called First Peoples, A Documentary History of Native Americans, of Native America by Colin Calloway, who's a professor at Dartmouth. So we can kind of see that if you talk to non-Native people, the one story that the textbook will talk about is the Cherokee Trail of Tears, and they'll say, oh yes, isn't it sad for the Cherokees that they had this Trail of Tears? Well, yes, it is. But what about the other 575 or 800 tribes that had the same story, but it never gets told? So this is a map of just some of the tribes that were removed from the East. We know that the Cherokees lost 25% of all of their people on that Trail of Tears. We know that the Choctaws and Chickasaws lost 1/3 of all of their people. So these are devastating, devastating stories. And even if you have the Seminoles, who part of them remain in Florida, part of them are removed to Indian country, that's now a tribe that's divided in half in such a time when you need to be united. So lots of trauma, even for the tribes that find a way, like the Eastern Band of Cherokees, to retain part of their homeland, or the Seminoles, or the Lumbee, and many others, the Mohegans, Wampanoag, up in the Northeast. And then we have the cultural genocide. Most Americans would define genocide as killing an entire group of people. They don't know that there are 4 types of genocide. And cultural genocide is just as devastating as physical genocide. So natives were forced to go to boarding schools. If they didn't willingly line their children up, age 5 to 18, to be sent, the police or military would be sent in. And so their children would be away from them for 13 years. The first thing that's going to happen is their hair is going to be cut, their clothing, and everything they brought with them, their sacred items, everything that their parents might have dressed them up in their best. And that's all going to be most likely burnt in front of them in a big bonfire on the first night. They're going to be dressed all the same. They're going to be punished every time they speak their native language, even though they don't know any other language but that. And so systematically over 13 years, there will be an attempt to wipe every single thing away that's native in them and to make them view their own culture and people as savage, evil, and backwards. So for some people that is success, for some students they succeed, and those kids don't even want to go back to their homeland. They want to deny that they're native in the first place because, any 5-year-old who's been through this system for 13 years, it would be almost a miracle if they came out with a different perspective. But then there are many people who go back home and are reassimilated back in with their people, learn their language, learn the ceremonies, and are able to, regain their native identity and, health. And then there are many people that commit suicide or self-medicate or perpetuate, generational trauma on the families because we know that physical, sexual, emotional, and psychological abuse happened for 13 solid years. So many of the issues that native homelands are dealing with today are the manifestations of colonialism. That could be diabetes as an epidemic. It could be, substance. It could be family disruption. It could be many, many things. Meskwakis have a very different story, however. We share many of the same traumatic events. We were estimated to be somewhere around 12 to 20,000 by various historians and French fur traders who traded with us when we were in the Green Bay area. And then through arguments with the French and wars for 30 plus years, our population was reduced to about 300, and still we would not surrender. And the other tribes, actually, who were originally kind of on the side of the French, said to the French, we're not sure if we want to trade with you anymore. We've had wars with other nations before, but we never tried to wipe an entire people out. Maybe you're not actually a human being. Maybe you're like an evil spirit. And so then the French said, no, 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 we will make peace with the Meskwakis. They did make peace with us, but our chiefs, obviously, if you have 300 people left, felt that it was too traumatic to stay where we were without all of those lost relatives. And we moved down into the southernmost part of our territory, which would be eastern Iowa, which we know is a woodland, 80% marsh, but filled with woods, forested lands. We had 8 villages, and eventually by 1820, we have around 1,500 people. And then the US government tries to make us the same tribe as the Sacs, who are on the Illinois side of the Mississippi. And what would they have to gain by that? Well, if the Sacs agree that they're going to vacate their lands after signing a treaty, a gunpoint treaty, of course, either sign this treaty or die. It's always funny when you hear the words, they ceded their land. Okay, if somebody broke into your house tonight and pointed a gun at your head and said, sign your house away to me, I don't think I would consider that person ceding to that person. I would consider it something very different than that. So they wanted to make us the Sac and Fox tribe of the Mississippi and Iowa, one tribe, when we had never been a Sac and Fox tribe. So we were marched out of Iowa in 1845. For 12 years, we were on the Osage River Reservation. There were about 100 Meskwakis that hid out along the Iowa River in the deeply forested areas. And we formed a connection with some Quakers. And as you know, Quaker people believe in nonviolence, and they also believe in equality and freedom of religion. And so the Quakers were allies to us. 12 years later, when Meskwaki people were reduced to 300 people again through starvation on the reservation and epidemics, a lot of our older people ate half rations so that they could save the annuity money to save $1,000. And when they saved $1,000, they had a couple of people go to Iowa City and offer money to the governor and ask how much land can we buy for $1,000 in 1857. Well, we know that a white settler could pay a $10 registration fee and get a piece of land. All they had to do was live there for 5 years, and it was theirs. We were originally given anywhere from 6 to 12 cents an acre in 1845, and the governor said that our money would buy 80 acres. 80 acres for $1,000. So we purchased the first 80 acres of the settlement, and since then, every time we were able, we have purchased more land to add to that. Until today, we have roughly 10,000 acres. So because we were private landowners, a lot of things were different for us than other tribes. So 300 Meskwakis returned to Iowa, and that was the start of the formation of what we call the Meskwaki settlement. So it's not a reservation, it's the Meskwaki settlement. The Bureau of Indian Affairs built a boarding school in Toledo meant for about 110 students, but the Meskwakis, for the most part, did not want to send their children. They had heard stories from Oklahoma and Kansas of what happened to the kids when they went to boarding school. And if you are familiar with Charles Eastman, he was a Dakota doctor. He was taken to boarding school. He converted to Christianity, and he was one of the first, if not the first, Native person to become a medical doctor. He came back and served with his people, and he continued to believe that Natives should convert to Christianity. So he visited us once, and even today, Meskwaki people, I would say, are 80% Meskwaki traditional religion. We're one of, the few tribes that have an intact traditional religion. And so back then, he visited us in the early 1900s, and the Meskwakis were very kind to him. They kind of knew what he wanted in the first place, and it wasn't going to happen, but they still, made a feast for him. They welcomed him. They listened to what he had to say. And then a Meskwaki elder says that his tribe would continue to follow the old trail. If you should live long, and the Great Spirit shall permit you to visit us again, you will find us still Indians, eating with wooden spoons out of bowls of wood. So even today, almost every Meskwaki person has a wooden bowl and our spoon, and when we have our ceremonies, that's what we use. And so I just thought it was super profound the first time I read those words. The government tried to compel Meskwakis to send their children to the school, but Meskwakis had purchased their land and won a court case. This is very simplified, leaving a lot of details out, but they won a court case, and it became voluntary for Meskwakis to attend, and the school could not compel Meskwakis to attend. That was the result of the court case. So, because the school was not very successful, even after busing in kids from Winnebago, kids from Minnesota, and from other Native communities, it was transformed into a tuberculosis sanitarium for Native people, and then later it became a button factory, and it's now called the Plantation Apartments. So, I know, it's pretty ironic. At least they kind of got the same name category. So this is a picture of that old boarding school that was built, and this is a picture of the school where I teach. So here are just some quotes from various Native people. The old people must start talking, and the young people must start listening. The language is the center of Meskwaki culture. To lose our language means that within 50 years, our religion and culture would also be gone. That's something that Jonathan told me when I first started teaching. Losing a language, and I'm sorry, Jonathan is our historical preservation director. Losing a language is a major setback for everyone, because along with the language, you will also lose all of the poems, the stories, the songs, and those things that are of immense importance to us all as human beings. One thing that I always tell my students when we're studying in sociology or in history about language, I use an example kind of related to the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that language shapes your version of reality. And it's that our ancestors, if you were to say a two-word phrase, in their minds, they would picture the trees talking to each other. But to explain it in English, you'd have to have this big, long explanation of why you weren't crazy, and then you'd have to say, like, what you thought you were hearing. And so a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was watching this show, and I saw something that made me rewind it like 3 times in a row. It was a 5-minute piece, and it was, I think his name is David Attenborough. He's the narrator for Planet Earth and many other shows. He said, the old wood trees are all connected underground with fungi, and he showed an example of a sapling growing next to these huge oak trees in Scotland, and he said that if there's a dry year and the sapling is starting to wilt, the old oak trees will send water through the fungi to that little tree so that it has enough water. And I was just sitting there, like, it almost made me cry. I was just like, I can't believe this. Like, wow, like our ancestors were so wise and they knew that. And now science is finally like telling us this. So if you lose your language, you lose the idea and knowledge of that phrase, the trees are talking to each other, when the wind is blowing and the leaves are rubbing against each other. There is no English translation for that. And then our mission statement at our school: to prepare students for lifelong learning, by preserving the language, culture, and traditions of the Meskwaki tribe while also providing a quality, comprehensive education. Our language carries our identity. We, the Meskwaki people, will remain strong in our culture, past and present, and future by continuing to speak our language. Meskwaki language preservation promotes language use and language learning in our community. This is taken straight from our Meskwaki language preservation website. And their goals are to develop effective language teachers, both at the adult level and the K through 12 or 3-year-old through 12 level, promote Meskwaki speaking in the community in everyday life, strengthen and sustain the language resources, and establish effective language revitalization programs. So you might be asking yourself, if we weren't forced to go to boarding school, then why is it that people under the age of 60 are not all fluent? Well, a change started to happen in the 70s and 80s. Public schools in Iowa, certainly mine, and certainly South Tama, where most Meskwakis might have been going if they lived near the settlement, were advocating for English speaking only. They were telling parents, your child, you want them to have a chance at going to college or a chance at a successful career, they need to master English, and they can't do that if you keep confusing them by teaching them Meskwaki first, and then they begin learning English at 3 or 4. And now in kindergarten, they're years behind, their English-speaking peers. Well, we know that in educational research, that's garbage. By age 6, kids can learn an infinite number of languages, and they will learn to separate it themselves. But, a lot of people believed in this theory and this idea, and they did stop maybe speaking Meskwaki. Maybe they would speak to them, and people can understand what's being said, but they can't answer back because it wasn't a side-by-side learning of 2 languages. And so, on the settlement, generally people who are over the age of 60 are fluent, and there are some people under the age of 60 that are fluent, just not a ton. And certainly there are some people over 60 who grew up away from the settlement that are not fluent speakers. So we do have a lot of things that the Meskwaki Language Department is doing to make language accessible. So we have the Meskwaki Language app, where Meskwaki language learners can click on a category, click on the word, and then a fluent speaker will say the word, and you can click it 20 times. In a way that, like, if you were talking to an elder and you didn't catch the word the first time, you almost feel like, oh, I'm sorry, but can you say it again and again? In this way, you can just press it as many times as you want without judgment or without feeling judged. And these are just some pictures. This is our school library. It says read, learn, and explore, and then Meskwaki underneath it. We have here a language night or a Pride Week activity where on the bottom right you see a couple of our language teachers are doing an activity with kids. And then this is our middle school language teacher here in the green shirt. And then we have, our ancestral farming leader who is tapping maple syrup with the kids and teaching them how to do that. And then we have often, powwows or nights when the kids can dance and sing in our language and have other activities to learn the language. So the mission of the Meskwaki Settlement School and the adult learning classes, Meskwaki tribal law says that all Meskwaki students, meaning 3 years old to 12th grade, will have 1 hour devoted to learning Meskwaki language. So it's a core class requirement at our school. So we have a 3 to 4-year-old language nest, and what that means is 3 and 4-year-olds are with fluent speakers, and that's the language spoken to them all day long. Native teaching assistants, so young people who are learning the language can apprentice with fluent speakers who are teachers to learn the language, but we also have fluent speakers in the classrooms of just an average everyday elementary room so that they can support the teacher with the language. And then non-native teachers learning and using Meskwaki language in all classrooms as they're able. Of course, some people acquire languages more easily than others, and we appreciate every person trying and learning continuously. So we have two full-time instructors and 2 part-time instructors who teach adult language learner classes. It started out as only in person, and then when COVID hit, we started virtual classes. And once that ended, we found that Meskwakis who live far away, maybe they're a professor on the East Coast or they're a college student in Arizona, continue to sign up for the virtual classes, and it was a way to make the language accessible to Meskwakis who aren't living close. So the classes are 12 weeks long, and there are 5 levels being taught. So I've taken Meskwaki 1 and 2, but my daughters have taken 1, 2, and 3. So, and more than 60 adults have already taken the classes, and the program continues to grow. So I'm going to switch over. Certainly, I'm not an expert on the Meskwaki language program. I'm just telling you kind of like what I can in the amount of time that we have. So we're going to switch over to food sovereignty, and that means being able to make all the decisions about what you're eating, where it comes from, and how it was grown. So food sovereignty and connecting the needs to the land and the food. So our system, these are just a couple quotes, our system has been colonized. It is through foodways that we engage in recovery from historical trauma to promote indigenous healing and self-determination. Diabetes is one of the physical manifestations of colonialism on native lands. So this is a White Mountain Apache chef, and he says this line in the film Gather, which I have a resource page up here. Right now, Gather is free on Netflix, if you have Netflix. It says it's leaving soon, but it's also available on Amazon, and it's one of the films that I absolutely show my students every year. It's very, very profound. Another woman who's part of Gather, we're introducing the young people to the land, the food, and our own traditional ways of healing. Twyla Casadore, Apache traditional harvester. And I wanted to show this flyer that just recently was posted by the Food Sovereignty Program. This is Luke Capello. He is a traditional wood carver, so he carves wooden spoons and bowls, but he's also the ancestral seed preservation officer. He's the ancestral farming manager, I believe it is. So he has a class for people who maybe don't have a ton of experience with like growing traditional crops, like as far as seed saving. So there's a lot of amazing things that the Food Sovereignty Initiative is doing. We also have Red Earth Gardens. There's a metal building here. In the background, you can see 3 greenhouses. They also have chickens, beehives for honey, and lots of crops being grown there. And then right here is an outdoor cooking space where people can come and cook, like they can have large community events and cook large amounts of foods, but they can also have classes on how to cook our traditional foods. In the top, you see some students, and they're restocking some refrigerators with the foods grown at Red Earth Garden. And then here they're harvesting a buffalo. So we have our students go out and learn how to cut up the buffalo into usable parcels. And then maybe every other month, the tribe will distribute buffalo meat to whoever in the tribe can use the buffalo meat. So we have a buffalo herd as part of our Meskwaki natural resources. And then these are just pictures of the students taking the corn off the cob, our traditional corn, Another picture with a different group of students, of kids with the maple syrup. And this is a movie night that Red Earth Gardens recently hosted about 2 weeks ago. So they had a dinner, and they invited people to bring, kind of potluck style, but then they also made a lot of foods. And then they show a movie outside. It just brings the community together. And it also, they're seeing what's on the farm, seeing what's being grown, and they're providing something for the community to do together on a Friday or Saturday night. So everything within the tribe is just kind of interwoven together. We have an amazing health director, Rudy Papaki, and he has incredible people who work with him at the health clinic. They were able to get funding and grants to build a brand new recreation center, and it's absolutely beautiful. They fund a lot of walks and runs. And so here you see the people who are participating in this walk are just about to take off on the route. So it's a way to teach the young people to be very active and to get their parents and grandparents out there with them. They have different routes, for different distances as people are able. And then we also have a Meskwaki farmers market for this is the second year. Happens every other Thursday, and of course anybody can come. And so local people can come and sell, whatever products, baked goods, or things that they've grown. And some non-native people, I believe, take part as well. So they offer weekly produce boxes for sale for organic crops that are in season and grown on the farm. The cost of the boxes is a lot less than one would pay if you were buying these same things at the grocery store. And of course, they host the events that I talked about to teach community members about healthy food, how to use this food in their cooking. So they'll have like a crock pot class. Here's how to cook this, food while you're at work. And when you come home, it's all ready. So there's a new class that I showed you the flyer for seed saving. And then I just recently saw that they are also starting up a farming club for kids in the community. So this is a diagram that I use. Even though it says it's for urban natives, I think it could be for any native community. So it starts with water, air, earth, and fire in the center, thought, spirit, feelings, and body. And the one that I'm used to using actually has the white and red circle as the third circle. It talks about like some issues that Native communities are working on across the nation. It says mental health or mental illness, victimization, learning challenges, intimate partner violence, struggling families, emotional imbalance, homelessness, poverty, hunger, physical illness, crime, alcoholism, and substance abuse. And then in my chart that I'm used to using, the solutions or the things that Native communities are doing are on the outside. It's just reversed here. So evidence-based treatment, empowerment, life skills, leadership training, education, positive parenting, community mobilization, family preservation, communication skills, evidence-based prevention, self-help. And, we practice our traditional religion, so on our charts, when my students copy this for themselves, I have them put, our traditional religion or whatever religion the family practices. The red road, which is another phrase that can just mean practicing your culture. Sweat lodge and traditional culture. Job training, wellness education, economic development, affordable housing. And then the very outer ring shows like what part of the community or infrastructure would work on that. So it shows that the entire community works together for the well-being of the whole community. And I feel like Meskwaki is doing an amazing job of that. So something that we started doing at our school is having a hiking club. So we have hikes some Wednesdays from 4 to 7:30 where we will travel in the school activity bus to a place that's 45 minutes or closer. So we might go to Pine Lake, or we might go to George Wythe, or someplace like that, Otter Creek. And we'll go on usually a 2 or 3 mile hike on Wednesday nights. And then we'll have just like a picnic dinner with the kids. And then on Sundays, typically Sundays, we might go anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours away and go on a longer hike. So it's typically 5 miles. So we go to places like Backbone or Wildcat Den State Park, or just all over. We prefer eastern Iowa just because of the heavily forested areas and longer trails. So we have we'll have a picnic lunch, and then we might have time where the kids get to jump in the water if it's a warm day. So you can see this is Makokata Caves just a few weeks ago. This is Wildcat Den, where the old mill is, and the waterfall. And then that is probably Backbone, I'm guessing. So it can be children anywhere from 4th grade to 12th grade. And the reason that we wanted to start this is because, like everywhere in America, following COVID, we had a lot of students that were just spending a lot of time at home or on gaming or on their phone, and just a lot fewer students joining athletics or other activities. And so we wanted to have, on the hike, we say, you're not allowed to have your phone out unless you're taking a picture of something beautiful. You're not allowed to be on the internet. When we sit down for lunch, do not get out your phone. Unless you're taking a picture of you and your friend and putting it away, it's time to interact with your friends. Because like most lunchrooms, you walk out and they're sitting at the same table, but they're on their phone. Every once in a while, they might be talking to each other, but they're really just on their phone or on their laptop. And then we also have, for the last 7 years, an organization called Meskwaki Geography Club. So we want to explore the cultures of people that are different from us, so language and geography. So students have to, in order to be invited, they have to have C- or above in all of their classes, maintain positive relationships with peers and school staff, and meet the school's attendance policy. So in a way, this is kind of like a positive behavior strategy. And certainly if they don't get their letter right away at the end of 9th grade, then they can come to me and I can say, hey, if you just fix this one thing, then you're going to get your letter very shortly. So a lot of people, of course they want to go on the trip. The students get to choose where they go in the world. As long as it's safe for us to go there, then we're going to go. So we worked through educational, an accredited company where they can get high school credit, or they can pay and get college credit. So in order to do this, we have to have 30 to 40 fundraisers over a 2-year time period. That can mean lots of suppers, lots of raffles, lots of different things going on to raise this amount of money, because the trip for each person can cost anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000. And some families are able to say, yeah, I'm going to make the monthly payment, but my child's also going to be in the fundraiser to help pay this off. And some people couldn't afford to pay, $1. So we want to make sure that every student can go on the trip if they qualify. So we have my husband would say we have an enormous amount of fundraisers. So we partner with an educational company. We took our first trip to Europe in 2019, landed in Amsterdam, and then kind of went all the way around to Germany, Italy, Switzerland, France, and London. And then we were scheduled to go to Australia, New Zealand, and Hawaii, which we were super excited about because we'll get to interact with Indigenous people. And then COVID hit, so we went a year late. And then we typically go every other year, but in 2023 we went because the first one was postponed. So we went to Japan. And then in 2025, we went to Europe this past summer. A similar route, only this time we also got to go to Scotland. And then in 2027, we had so many students sign up, and 10 adults, 10 family members, signed up and are going to pay for themselves. So we had enough that we could actually customize our trip. The first time we went to New Zealand, which was the country I was most excited about, we got to spend 2 days in Auckland, and that's it. And like 1 day in Rotorua, where there's a lot of indigenous people, and then we were off. And so we were very disappointed that we were mostly in the city and not interacting with indigenous people the way that we had hoped. So this one was actually a customized, where we got to say, this is where we want to go, this is what we want to do while we're there. So we're in New Zealand for 5 days, Australia for 7, and Hawaii for 2 days. So this is pictures of the trip that just happened this past summer. So this is Dijon, France, I believe, and that's the Netherlands. Oh, got kind of cut off. Huh. And then this is our current bunch, but 5 people were missing when I took the picture, so it's actually a little bit larger than that. So these guys are in 9th and 10th grade currently. And so when they take their trip, it'll be the end of 11th grade, and the other half will have just graduated. So, and they asked me to include a link. Sorry, this is not a solicitation. So if you're interested in donating, you certainly could. We're definitely not going to object. All right, so, and then this is a resource document, and if anybody would like to learn more about any of the areas, I just have some things on here. There's an amazing podcast by Matika Wilbur. It's called All My Relations, and she just tackles a new topic every few weeks. And then she also published a book. She traveled around the nation for 10 years. She's a gifted photographer, and she took pictures in every federally recognized tribe, and she published a book called Project 562, and it just has like a page devoted to like an amazing person in each community who's doing something incredible. And then, yeah, there's just more. There's books on food sovereignty, there's documentaries, language, and then just history in general. So if you're interested, and then I realized I didn't put any of the Meskwaki books on here, so I printed off just that slide. One incredible book that just came out is by Dr. Eric Zimmer, and he spent several years doing research at the Meskwaki Archives and Museum, and something like 18,000 primary and secondary sources, I want to say, went into writing Red Earth Nation, which Meskwaki means people of the Red Earth. So it's a comprehensive book about our removal, our return to Iowa, and kind of up to the present. And then there's a great book by another professor, Dr. Foley. It's called The Heartland Chronicles, and it has the Welcome to Tama sign on it, which ironically is a headdress, even though Meskwakis are not Plains nations. We didn't really have that, but that's the Welcome to Tama sign. And it's interviews with non-Native people in town and people on the settlement. And of course, if you ever want to discover contested areas or areas of tension, you just go to any border town near a Native homeland, and you'll find it's kind of counterintuitive, because you think the more you interact with a group of people, the more enlightened you'd be. But in the past, maybe not today, but in the past, the recent past, that was certainly an issue. So, all right, so that's all I have for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Now we are going to move to a question and answer portion. So if you have a question for our speaker, please raise your hand, and I will bring the microphone to you.
Thank you so much. We are all so privileged to hear your wisdom and your point of view. So thank you for coming. And I just want to echo something. Really, get your pocketbooks out. These extraordinary experiences that she creates for these young people, broadening their own experience and their own sense of identity as Meskwaki. And I have to say that because I know Leah makes about 200 sheet cakes a year and lots of desserts, and works very, very hard beyond the classroom just to make that dream come true. So there's always a GoFundMe page, or in the spring she'll have these raffles, and
Right.
you know, really just enter for fun if nothing else, but really help these kids have that experience and support Leah in her work. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Mary.
You've talked about the settlement and the property that the settlement has. Is this privately owned? Is this owned by the tribe? Is it kind of like the amount of colonies used to be? Can you explain more about the
Sure.
organization of that?
It is federally, it's now federally designated land, but it is land that we purchased ourselves, but it's owned in common by the tribe. So for instance, if I lived on the settlement, I would have a house that belongs to the tribe, and I could live there throughout my life. And if I have, children that decide they want to live on the settlement and they qualify, then they would be able to live in my house. I could pass it on to them when I go. And but in the end, the land will always belong to the tribe as a whole. It will be recognized as your house and your yard and your land, but it's not privately owned by you, because that would mean it could be sold and lost to the people. But it's of use to you for as long as you live and as long as your descendants live, as long as you are, you can lose your house if you're doing something like illegal, like manufacturing or selling drugs or something like that, But other than that, it's your home.
I'm assuming that there's a lot of farmland included there. So who does the management of the properties?
I'm sorry, are you imagining like leasing out to farmers, or?
Yeah, or how do you plant the crops? Who does that?
We all, everybody has, they plant their own crops in their own yard. So it's just, you can't grow non-Meskwaki corn on our land because of the cross-pollination. That would destroy our corn. So we don't allow GMO corn to be grown on the settlement. So otherwise it would, ruin it. So I don't know if I said this, but when I was growing up, my grandparents, when we would harvest our corn or plant our corn, if somebody accidentally dropped a seed, they would say, "Oh, pick that up quickly." And then, you'd pick it up. And I remember once somebody spilled 4 or 5 kernels of corn when we were laying our corn out to be dried after we parched it. And my grandparents said, "Oh, quickly pick that up." And the person was like, "Oh, no, I'll pick it up in a little bit." And they were like, "No, that corn has a spirit. And if you treat it callously like that and you just throw it on the floor and leave it there, we are going to, it's not going to bless us in the future. It's not going to grow." You have to be very mindful that. So for instance, our corn is genetically unique among all other corn on the whole earth. Meskwaki corn, if I dropped a kernel of Meskwaki corn in a agri-lab in Germany, for instance, they could pick it up and analyze it, and they would know that it was Tama flint from Tama, Iowa. It was our corn. There's no other corn that's like it. So our corn is unmodified, and it is not sweet corn. It doesn't taste like sweet corn at all. And it has 14 vitamins and nutrients that American corn does not have. So American corn is considered a starch by nutritionists, and our corn is a vegetable because it has those 14 extra vitamins and minerals. And so, they said, this corn that we're giving you to plant in the soil, that has been passed for thousands of years. From those original seeds, these are our seeds, and you have to take care of them, and you have to really be mindful of how special they are, because if we lose our seeds, just like if we lose our language, we can't return to a home country like Japan or Germany to relearn our language or to go get our seeds from somewhere else. This is our only chance. This is all we have. This is our original homeland. And so if it's lost, it's gone. And if the seeds are lost or treated carelessly, they're gone. There's no getting them back. So.
Hello, Teacher Leah. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to, there are a few of us here from the University of Iowa's Teacher Education. Dr. Kim, myself, Liz Corson is here, but we have so many young people here, so I just wanted them to also, I wanted you to know these are future elementary educators, and we are so grateful. Thank you so much for weaving the stories of young people and for us to get to learn with you.
Oh,
and y'all, please, can you just raise your hands also that you're here? Yeah, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you so much for coming.
I was just curious about other native indigenous languages, and do you have any sort of working together? Are there languages that, like Danish and Norwegian, they're similar and you can sort of share?
There are language families. You can kind of, if you wanted to Google a Native American language family map, there are tribes like the Sacs or the Kickapoos, Potawatomis, Ojibways, Crees that are all in our language family, like the Blackfeet Nation of Montana. They're kind of like an island out there. They're related to us as well. So like if our fluent speakers were talking to their fluent speakers, it would kind of like be listening to somebody from deep Mississippi talking to somebody from Minneapolis. And you'd be like, I can kind of figure out what you're saying. Like our words are the same, but you're saying them completely in a different way. And you have some different words that I don't even know what they mean, but I can get the gist of what you're saying. So that's Algonquin languages. And Meskwaki language is the root language of all the Algonquin languages. It's basically the languages of the Northeast minus the Iroquois languages. So.
Hi, I'm Ashlyn. I'm from the elementary ed program, and I was just wondering, like, in the future, how, like, elementary educators can incorporate the Meskwaki culture, like, in our classrooms and, like, educate the younger students on it.
Yeah, if I were to answer that question, I would say I would start from the present and talk about things like food sovereignty, because it really applies to all human beings. Like, we're at an emergency right now as humans with, like, what is happening with our food? What are we actually eating? Can we fish in Iowa rivers? Can we drink the water? Like, we had a news story in Tama just a few months ago or a year ago saying there's forever chemicals from the spill at the paper mill, most likely, that are now and they never leave your body. They attach themselves to your fat and you'll have them for as long as you live. So, but the person said, don't worry, you can still drink it. It's still safe to drink. Oh, wow, really? So like, food sovereignty is a lesson everyone can learn. So learn about current things going on in Native communities and then trace your way backwards to like, where did that start? Like, what was going on that this is actually happening right now? What history books tend to do, like American textbooks, is talk about natives in the 1800s, and then natives just disappear. So I was doing my student teaching, actually, in 2008 in Kelowna, and I had this amazing middle school class, and they were great kids. One of the gifted students said to me, hey, Ms. Slick, you mean you're Native? I thought all this time that you might be like Hispanic or something. And I was like, no, I'm Meskwaki. And they're like, is that in Iowa? And I'm like, yes, it is. And then he said, oh, but I thought all the natives were dead. And there was just like silence in the room, you know? And why wouldn't a smart kid think that? Because if natives were still alive, why wouldn't they be in the American history book as the original Americans? Why wouldn't we be talking about what they're doing today? And no, I don't need to wear my regalia to this event because like I'm an average everyday person and I wear my regalia when I dance or for ceremonial things, but I don't need to like, you know, costume myself for other people to prove that I'm Native, you know what I mean? So like Native people need to be studied as living people in modern times. So that's my answer. Oh no, you can. I can hear you. You can just say it.
I would just like to know kind of what the concept of indigenous sovereignty means to you, kind of as an encompassing term. And then I would like to know maybe your thoughts on how larger institutions that maybe aren't necessarily Native-led can help empower indigenous communities to achieve indigenous sovereignty.
Yeah, I would say larger institutions, if you're talking about colleges and universities, so many colleges and universities have been now kind of like terrified of like, what does it look like to safely teach American Indian studies and not have it lumped into the American Studies program, or African studies and not have it lumped into the American Studies program. There used to be an American Indian Native Studies program here at the university. We had a Choctaw professor of history and a Choctaw professor of Native religious traditions. And now, you know, the program has been cut so much, and it's been like, you know, all of the cultural programs have been conglomerated into like one generic department. And so I would say, like, have the courage to teach real American studies in the departments that they belong in, because they're worthy of having their own departments. And also, if it's a school system or a company, you know, the only way that the team, the Washington Commanders, changed, it wasn't because they themselves had an attack of moral conscience and said, oh, we've been using a term that refers to paying bounties for native skins. They used to pay a dollar coin for every native skin that was large enough to prove that you killed a native person, and $1.25 for children, because they never grew up to have children. And that's what that term is referring to. But for years, our nation's capital had the Washington Redskins as their... So, you know, the way that changed was companies, news broadcasters, and, you know, Native people and allies across the nation said, how is this still happening in the 2000s? And then they just wouldn't say their name anymore. So when it came down to money and support and public opinion, they realized they had to change it. So that's what, you know, people can educate themselves, and which I know is, in a way, you don't know what you don't know, and when your education system is already failing you by marginalizing, you know, women, people with disabilities, people of different cultures and religions, or different gender identities and sexuality, then, you know, it's hard to know all the things that you don't know and that you're not exposed to. And it's really hard in this climate to know what you can and can't do as a teacher, unless you're me, because I don't even have to pay attention to that, other than knowing that other people have to live under that, colleagues have to live under that in other schools. Knowing that the population doesn't get the same education that my students do. So.
Is it okay if I jump in?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know that this is going to apply in the case of Meskwaki, but I'm curious about, I don't know if it's called a program or policy of land back. I'm just curious if you can explain a little bit about what that is and your thoughts on that.
Well, land back is like educating the American public on, you know, real history, and advocating for lands to be returned where they can be, so, and where they should be. So that's really, it's that simple. You know, like we have had lands returned to us by families who said, you know, we do want to return like this land back to you guys. And that's happened in other parts of the nation as well. And it's definitely a national movement. We know that the court case in Oklahoma has designated, large portions of Oklahoma to be under, tribal sovereignty, and non-Native people live there very happily. And maybe some are not happy about it, who knows? But I'm sure there are some that are not happy. But, it's not like if Natives get land back, they're going to just kick people off and advocate for other people to go into suffering because this land was returned to them. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you.
So.
Well, I know we want to learn more, and it's time for a wrap up things. Thank you so much. Let's give her another round of applause. Thank you for coming tonight, and we have another wonderful program on Wednesday, October 29th, 6 p.m. What are the costs of widespread economic inequalities? I hope we can see you again. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
If you're interested in any of the resources that I mentioned, they're here. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, of course. There's many, many others out there.
Right.
You had your presentation.
Yeah. Oh, no.